So I want to show you this segment because I think it's very, very illuminating to what is going on in terms of the DNC and how they're trying to rig this thing. Let's take a look.
There was Kamala Harris's quick rise and long fall. Pete Buttigieg has surged recently in Iowa and New Hampshire. Elizabeth Warren spent months climbing in the polls only to lose some momentum in the last few weeks. All the while, Bernie Sanders has been chugging along at between 15 and 20% in national polls. His support has barely budged, second only to Joe Biden. It's therefore easy to forget about Bernie, and he's gotten less coverage in the media than the other frontrunners, but he's still in a pretty decent position. He's within striking distance of winning both Iowa and New Hampshire. According to the 538 polling average, Buttigieg currently leads in Iowa by about 1 point, but it's basically a three-way tie between him, Biden, and Sanders. The same is true, more or less, in New Hampshire. Sanders is also polling relatively strongly in the third state to vote, Nevada, and his support has edged up in delegate-rich California, which votes on Super Tuesday. Here's why that matters. Sanders is close enough to Biden nationally that bounces from the early states, especially in Iowa, could make the rest of the race extremely competitive. Of course, being in striking distance in Iowa and New Hampshire and Nevada is not the same thing as actually winning those states. And if he does manage to win an early state or two and close the gap on Biden, you would expect the Democratic Party elites might make some moves to stop Sanders. So do I buy that Bernie has a shot at the nomination? Definitely, I do. Look, if you had to pick one candidate in this race, it would probably be Biden. His position is fairly robust. But Bernie has as strong a hand to play as anybody else.
So the first thing there is Nate Silver, who's consistently wrong about everything, just admitted. I mean, they called you conspiracy theorists in 2016, but they just admitted you could expect that if Bernie were to win Iowa, the Democratic Party is going to try to stop him. So this is finally, they're admitting that there's a coordinated campaign, particularly among the media, but also the DNC, all this, to stop one candidate. So at least Nate is being honest in this regard. But I think the real interesting part comes a little bit later in this segment. So let's if you could stomach it, let's play a little bit more of it.
Power Bernie Sanders this year, but I want to tie that to the election of Boris Johnson on Thursday. He seems to be uniting a lot of analysts. Mike Bloomberg says he's the canary in the coal mine for Democrats. Steve Bannon, James Carville says you can go so far to the left you can lose to an unacceptable incumbent. That's the lesson. The lesson is screaming right in your face. Steve Bannon picks up on that. If Democrats don't take the lesson, Trump is headed for a Reagan-like 84 victory. So, Ruth Marcus, if James Carville and Steve Bannon agree, does that mean it's right or it's wrong?
Well, that's an interesting question. Look, we all have a tendency to overinterpret the impact of midterm elections, of off-year elections, and certainly of elections in other countries, which have different politics and different political systems than ours. That said, that lesson of that election, which I'm going to now overinterpret, having warned against it, is not good news for Democrats, and it should be particularly chilling for people who are thinking about the possibility of a Sanders nomination, because that I'm not sure we're going to get to Reagan landslide territory, but I think it would be a really big challenge for Democrats.
And Patrick, yes, one of the things we've seen from Democratic voters this year is even though like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren take a big chunk of the vote, 30, 40% of the vote, sometimes more. Whenever one of them rises too high, they do seem to hit a wall with Democratic voters who are most concerned about who can beat Trump.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that boom and bust cycle, but I have to just very quickly say, George, that I don't think there are many lessons from England unless you think of Corbyn as a serious leader. This was a failed leader who coddled the anti-Semites in his ranks and never took a clear, coherent position on Brexit. That's why he failed there. But there is this boom bust inside the Democratic Party over the course of the last many months. If you had told me that Mayor Pete would be in the contest still and Kamala Harris would be out, if you said that 6 months ago, I'd say that you were insane. There's a resilience that Bernie Sanders has demonstrated 4 years ago that continues to accrue to his benefit now. That California number is powerful. He's up at 26% in California now. California votes early on March 3rd. If he finishes...
Votes even before that. I mean, the date is March 3rd.
They start the early voting. He's the only one with any serious momentum right now. And as Governor Christie has pointed out to me, the superdelegate erasure from the Democratic Party is only going to benefit Bernie Sanders in the end.
So, wow. I am surprised. I am surprised on a Sunday morning show they even let that guy on because he makes some good points. Bernie is on the rise. He's on the rise 7 points in South Carolina, which he didn't mention. But Bernie's on the rise in California. Bernie is basically the most steady of all of these candidates. You hear right there a guest actually say, don't sleep on Bernie. He's doing really well in California. He should have mentioned South Carolina, but whatever. Take what you can get. So here is the corporate media propaganda against Bernie that is not based in fact, but you are going to hear a lot of this if Bernie were to win Iowa.
You know, if you're Donald Trump, you're sitting and watching this and you just can't believe your good fortune.
Again, your good
Right?
fortune again.
You really can't believe it. I mean, the fact that Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren are the people who've had where the energy is. Joe Biden has seemed unable to perform at a level that's acceptable for him to take off with the rest of those voters that are reluctant about Warren and Sanders. And that Buttigieg just does not seem, in my view, to be able to be taken long-term seriously as a nominee for a whole bunch of reasons, including his lack of support in the minority community. I think, you know, he's looking at the very real possibility that he could be running against a Warren or a Sanders, which he would relish.
But Rich Lowry, if Bernie Sanders has persisted, and he has stayed pretty steady even after a heart attack, so has Joe Biden at the top of the poll. He's been remarkably stable, it turns out.
His performance has never risen above fair or middling at best, and still he showed remarkable persistence. But look, this thing is wide open. Biden easily could win Iowa. Wins Iowa, is probably the nominee, and it's much less dramatic than we thought. But as Nate Silver alluded to, Bernie Sanders easily could win Iowa and New Hampshire, and then you're looking at a desperate stop Bernie Sanders campaign. So I would say two things the last couple of weeks have been the big story in the Democratic race. One, the uptick of Bernie Sanders. The other is Amy Klobuchar beginning to show.
Oh, God, you gotta love it. I don't know what's funnier, Rich Lowry, just general, or the fact that they're now continuing this nonsense about Amy Klobuchar. Amy Klobuchar. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So let me explain to you what they're doing here. And then I'm going to show you some real alarming conflicts of interest that are not being disclosed, showing that the DNC is still trying to rig the election against Bernie. So Chris Christie, of course, George Stephanopoulos, I call him. Chris Christie, fact-free, he's done, clogging bridges in New Jersey. Chris Christie says, without facts, Donald Trump is licking his chops. Licking his chops. He just can't wait for Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, he put in there. Despite the fact that Bernie Sanders right now, poll after poll, is beating the living beep out of Donald Trump. He's beating Donald Trump by 10 to 12 points head-to-head. He is beating Donald Trump in Michigan in many polls. He is beating Donald Trump in Wisconsin in some polls. He is beating Donald Trump in Pennsylvania in some polls. But Chris Christie, and this is what you're going to see, is allowed to just lie. No pushback on the fact that he's just making shit up. Totally making shit up. Bernie Sanders has been crushing Donald Trump head-to-head for 4 years. Donald Trump isn't licking his chops to go against Bernie Sanders. Donald Trump is praying he could go against either Joe Biden, who is Hillary Clinton with different body parts, or Pete Buttigieg. That's who Donald Trump wants to run against because it's the same exact candidate he just beat. Honestly, say what you want about Hillary Clinton, I'm no fan. Joe Biden is a worse candidate than Hillary Clinton. You think the cognitive mess you see during these debates, during these speeches, you think it's going to get better in a year if he's the nominee? If he's on the Democratic debate stage against Bernie Sanders, you think it's going to get better? No. No. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. So, Chris Christie's allowed to lie, but then you have Rich Lowry. I mean, this should be scandalous that they're saying this, but it's not, because they're openly admitting that they are trying to crush Bernie Sanders. You have Rich Lowry saying, well, if Bernie wins Iowa, that's it. There's going to be an onslaught against him. You have Nate Silver, who literally has called you all conspiracy theorists for daring to say that the primary was rigged in 2016. All of these people on ABC, all of these people in the New York Times, they just call you kooky conspiracy theorists. Oh, those progressives with their little conspiracy theories. Nate Silver just said the Democratic Party would coalesce to stop Bernie Sanders if he wins Iowa. Rich Lowry just said it. I don't see George Stephanopoulos challenging them on that. Do you? What's amazing to me about this, they're openly saying if Bernie wins Iowa, they are going to bring an onslaught on Bernie Sanders. An onslaught. They're not going to let the democratic process play out. They're not going to stay out of it. They're going to interfere. Honey, what is it the Democratic Party is so upset about? Foreign interference, right? From who? Russia? So the Democratic Party, who our holy democracy is under attack. Our holy democracy is under attack. They are very, very ready to interfere if it's Bernie Sanders.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.